My world smelled of high-octane fuel and hot metal, a familiar perfume. In Gorky, before all this, it was the sharp scent of wet mortar and curing concrete. Different materials, same principle. You build something strong, something that will hold. You trust your work. Here in the cockpit of my yak, I trusted the rivets and the spars, the tension of the control cables. They were my foundation, my load-bearing walls against the crushing weight of the sky. The sun over Prokhorovka was a cruel, white furnace. Below us, the world was a nightmare of smoke and fire. It was July 1943. From 3,000 meters, the tanks were just beetles, crawling and spitting flame. A great, rolling metal plague devouring the black earth of the motherland. It made my stomach clench. I had seen what they did to our cities. Walls I might have helped raise, torn down to rubble. Foundations cracked, futures erased. That was a special kind of violation a man like me could never forgive. This fight, this was vengeance. It was the only way to earn back the right to build again. Volkov, watch your six. Focke-Wulf's coming in high, crackled the voice of my flight leader, Ivan, in my ears. I didn't need the warning, I'd seen them. Their silhouettes were sharp, predatory. Well-built machines, I had to admit. Strong lines, but every structure has a weak point. You just have to know where to look. I eased the stick, my yak responding like an extension of my own arm. The airframe vibrated, the Klimov engine a deep, reassuring roar in my chest. We were the Ninth Guards. We were a hammer, and it was our job to find the cracks in their wall. The sky erupted. It was no longer a vast, open space. It became a cramped, chaotic workshop filled with flying metal, greasy smoke, and streaks of tracer fire. You don't think, you react. It's all instinct and geometry. Angles, deflection, leading the target. It's like laying a course of bricks, each one needing to be perfectly placed to support the next. A burst from my SH-vac cannon, and I watched the wing of a Messerschmitt simply come apart, like a poorly mortared joint failing under stress. It tumbled away, a spiral of black smoke. One down. There was no elation, just a grim tally, a methodical task. Dismantle the enemy piece by piece so we could start rebuilding. We wheeled and dove, a swirling ballet of death. I saw another yak, not from my flight, take a direct hit to the engine. It blossomed into a bright orange flower for a heartbeat, then vanished. The man inside, gone. Another debt to be paid. I pushed the thought away. No room for it here. Only the work matters. I spotted my own target. A Focke-Wulf 190, painted with a gaudy yellow nose. He was good. He stayed out of my sights, trying to drag me into a turning fight where his machine had the edge. But I was patient. A good builder is always patient. You wait for the right moment to set the stone. He made his mistake. He pulled up too steeply, exposing the soft belly of his aircraft. I lined him up. The crosshairs settled just ahead of his cockpit. My thumb pressed the firing stud. The plane shuddered as the cannon spoke, spitting out a stream of angry metal. I saw the shells connect, walking a perfect line up the fuselage. They stitched a seam of destruction right into his engine cowling. He faltered, trailing glycol and smoke. He was finished. A structure compromised beyond repair. It was in that moment of focus, that singular second of professional satisfaction, that I became the nail instead of the hammer. The world exploded in a concussion of sound and force that felt like a demolition charge going off against my spine. My head slammed against the canopy. The cockpit filled with the acrid smell of burning wires and cordite. A jagged hole the size of my fist had appeared in the instrument panel, a 20 cannon shell. It had passed straight through, missing me by centimeters, but it hadn't missed the plane. My beautiful yak lurched violently to the right. The stick went slack in one direction and became an immovable steel bar in the other. I looked out. The rear section of my starboard wing was shredded. The fabric was peeled back, revealing the wooden skeleton beneath, and I could see the main spar, the primary support. The spine of the wing was splintered and buckled. It was a compound fracture. The wing was sagging, held on by little more than hope and a few remaining ribs. Every vibration sent a fresh wave of terror through me. The plane was dying. I could feel its structure failing, groaning under the strain. Below me was a sea of German Panzers and infantry. To be captured, that was my deepest fear. To be caged by the men who had torn my country to pieces. No, not that. I would not give them the satisfaction. My practical mind took over. The engine was still running, rough but alive. I had some control, however sluggish. I had to get down, now. I kicked the rudder, fighting the wounded plane, forcing its nose toward the Soviet lines. The horizon tilted crazily. The ground rushed up. There was no airfield, just the pockmarked hellscape of the front. But I saw it, a stretch of field between two shell-pocked woods, miraculously untouched. It was short, uneven, but it looked solid enough. Mayday, mayday, Red 4 is going down. I'm attempting a landing east of the railway line. I spoke into the radio, my voice calm, distant. It felt like I was describing someone else's fate. Ivan's voice came back, strained. We see you, Dmitri. Hold on. We'll cover you. I didn't look back to see them. All my focus was on that strip of dirt. It was like inspecting a foundation before a build. Was the ground firm? Was it level enough? Landing gear was out of the question. A belly landing. I cut the throttle, and the sudden quiet was more terrifying than the engine's roar. The only sound was the shriek of the wind over my torn wing. The ground came up fast. I held the stick back, trying to bleed off every last bit of speed. The tail touched first, then the belly scraped, a horrific, grinding shriek of tortured metal. The plane slewed sideways, a wingtip dug into the soft earth, and we spun in a cloud of dirt and grass before shuddering to a violent, final stop. Silence a ringing in my ears, the distant, rhythmic thump of artillery. I was alive, I was down, and I was on our side of the line, barely. I scrambled out of the cockpit, my legs shaking. The yak looked pitiful. A broken bird with a shattered wing, my beautiful tool ruined. A wave of anger washed over me, cold and hard. I refused to accept it. I walked over to the wing, my boots sinking into the churned soil. The damage was severe. The main spar was cracked clean through in one place, splintered in another. It was the keystone of an arch, and it had failed. Without it, the wing had no integrity. The plane would never fly. I could hear shouts nearby. Soviet infantry, their faces smeared with grime, running from a tree line. An officer reached me first. "Pilot, are you all right? We need to get you out of here. The Germans are less than a kilometer away." "I'm fine," I grunted, my eyes still fixed on the wing. "But the plane is not. I can't leave her." He looked at me like I was mad. "Comrade, it's a wreck. It's finished. Be glad you are alive." Something inside me hardened. Finished. Nothing is finished until it's rubble. This was just damaged. It needed repair. My hands, calloused from years of handling bricks and tools, flexed at my sides. I was a builder. This was just a different kind of construction site. "Get me tools," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "A wrench, a drill if you have one, and I need metal, a strong piece, and bolts." The officer stared, but my stubbornness must have convinced him. He sent a soldier scurrying off. For the next 2 hours, with the battle raging just over the horizon, that field became my workshop. They brought me tools from a field maintenance kit, and my salvation, the drive shaft from a wrecked GAZ truck. It was heavy, solid steel. It would be my splint. I went to work. The soldiers stood guard, watching me with a mixture of awe and disbelief. I ignored them. I ignored the rumble of the guns. My entire world shrank to that broken spar. Using a hand drill, I bored holes through the splintered wood and the metal ribs on either side of the break. My hands were steady. This was familiar territory, bracing a weak point, reinforcing a failing structure. I heaved the heavy drive shaft into place, laying it across the break like a steel bandage. It was crude, ugly, but it was strong. I hammered bolts through the holes I'd drilled, cinching them down with a heavy wrench until my muscles screamed and sweat poured into my eyes. It was a jury-rig of the highest order. It was an insult to aeronautical engineering, but as a bricklayer I knew it would hold. It distributed the load. It transferred the stress away from the brake. It was a flying patch, nothing more, but it might be enough. The officer returned. "Pilot, you are wasting your time. They will be shelling this field soon." "I'm finished," I said, wiping grease and grime from my face with the back of my hand. I looked at my handiwork. It wasn't pretty, but it was solid, like a good brick wall. The soldiers helped me push the plane, turning it to face the longest stretch of the field. I climbed back into the cockpit. It felt different now. This wasn't just a machine issued to me by the state. This was my work. My hands had saved it. I fired up the engine. It coughed, sputtered, then caught with a roar that was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I gave the assembled soldiers a short nod. They looked at me as if I were a ghost. Maybe I was. I pushed the throttle forward. The yak lumbered across the bumpy field, shaking and rattling. The patched wing bucked and groaned. I prayed to any god that might be listening and to the strength of my own 2 hands. The plane gathered speed. I pulled back gently on the stick. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then, slowly, reluctantly, the earth fell away. I was flying. The plane flew heavy, trying constantly to bank to the right. I had to fight the controls the entire way, my left arm burning with the strain of keeping the wings level. Every gust of wind was a fresh wave of terror. I didn't dare climb high, staying low, hedge-hopping back towards my home base. The ground streaked by below, a blur of trenches and wrecked steel. When the familiar outlines of my airfield appeared on the horizon, a wave of relief so powerful it almost made me black out washed over me. I circled once carefully and lined up for a landing. I came in fast and hard, letting the plane settle onto the runway. It bounced, swerved, but it held together. As I rolled to a stop, the entire ground crew was running towards me, their faces masks of sheer astonishment. My commander, Major Kozlov, was the first to the cockpit. He looked from my face to the grotesque steel patch on the wing and back again. He was speechless. He just shook his head, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Volkov," he finally said, clapping me on the shoulder hard enough to make me stumble. "I have never in all my years seen anything like it. You are not just a pilot, you are a damn fixer." The name stuck, Dmitri the Fixer. I suppose it fits. I spent my life building things, and the war tried to make me a breaker. But on that day, over the burning fields of Kursk, I learned that sometimes the most important act is not to destroy, but to stubbornly, defiantly, refuse to let something be destroyed. I fixed my plane, yes, but I think I was also fixing something inside myself. I was reminding myself what I was fighting for, the day when we could put down our guns, pick up our tools, and begin to build again. These memories are heavy, but they must be shared. Subscribe to ensure these stories are never forgotten.